Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to fix the issue on the Colorado with the tires rubbing, and we're also going to add another spacer from rough country to level out the truck even more. All right, so there's a couple things we're going to do today, a couple little things on top of modifying the fender well plastic to make the truck not rub and putting in the second part of that leveling kit. So we're also going to cover up the bow tie on the steering wheel with a black vinyl I got, which of course I'll link in the description below. And we're also going to install the matte black exhaust tip, the same one Matt 1003 had on his truck in that previous video where I met up with him. If you haven't seen that yet, I'll link it up at the top right. But ultimately, I had been looking at that same exact exhaust tip, and it just so happened that he installed it about a week after I had originally purchased it. So he beat me to it, but I got to see it in action, and I got to realize I really did like the look of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that on as well. All right, guys, here we are inside the truck, and here is another shameless merch plug. If you guys like the HPO key tags, go ahead and send me an email, horse.power.obsessed, and I'll get you some sent out. But anyway, on to the mod. So as you can see here, I still have the gold bow tie on my steering wheel when I have replaced all of the bow ties outside to black. Here's what we're going to be working with. I will put a link to this down in the description below. They actually send you 2 vinyls pre-cut to fit this, and in the back there is another full sheet vinyl if you just wanted to put something completely over this and cut it out yourself around the bow tie. I'm going to kind of go over the installation. It's really not difficult. You stick it on there, and as long as you get it on there straight, you just hit it with a heat gun, push it into the little indents in here. I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see it, but there is a texture to this logo, and as long as you use a heat gun and push it down, these will adhere to the texture pretty well. One more thing to say before we get started here is the color I went with is a matte black. Like I said, I'll put a link in the description below, but from what I've read, a lot of people who went with shiny or glossy black said it was basically too glossy. So I'm going to stick with the matte just because pretty much all the black on the truck already is matte, and I think that will look the best for the interior. So I got it on there just with my fingers. It's on there perfectly straight. So I'm going to go ahead and hit it with a heat gun now, just apply a little bit more pressure to get some of the texture to show through and make sure everything's laying down perfectly flat. Not sure how well it's going to come through on camera here, but you can clearly see in person a lot of the texture starting to show through. So I'm going to hit it a couple more times with the heat gun, push it down a little bit more with my finger, and it looks perfect. So we're going to go ahead and get this installed too. This is real easy. It's literally just a clamp and a 15mm bolt. All right, boys, there it is. Fully installed, definitely not hard. But if we check underneath here, you can see, like I said, the 15mm bolt is up at the top, and that's what it looks like from underneath. All of the stuff that I'm doing today, I'll link in the description down below, so be sure to check it out. This looks great on the truck. If you're going for any kind of red, black, white, black type combination, this is perfect. I give it a thumbs up. Definitely check it out. At the bottom of the fender well, we have 1, 2, 3 T15 torque screws that we're going to have to remove. And if you have fender flares like I do, you'll have to remove 1, 2, 3 to be able to allow this to be pulled back enough to get to the waffle weave plastic that's behind this fender well lining that we're going to modify. That will ultimately allow this fender well shield to sit further forward so the tires don't rub on it anymore. And once we pull the fender shield back, you can see that plastic piece right there is the one we're going to be modifying. So this whole piece unbolts, and we're going to basically cut it back a little bit. Once you have the fender shield pulled back, you can get underneath the truck, and we're going to remove some T15 screws, and then this entire piece that we're going to modify will come right out. After you get all the T15 screws out, there is 1 screw left. It's right back here, and it is a 7mm hex head. Once we take this out, this entire plastic piece is going to drop down and we can start modifying it. Now, this modification is not difficult, but for some it's kind of iffy on whether or not you feel comfortable doing something like this. And if you don't, a company called ProClip actually makes replacement versions of this that basically have the same size as this will after we modify it. So if you want to do that, I will link them in the description down below. They're like $60, which was, in my opinion, a little bit overkill for something like this, especially since we can modify these and achieve the same result. But anyway, what we're ultimately going to do here is we're going to cut right here, right along this line, all the way over to right here. Then we're going to basically cut up to that one. So it's going to be a slightly angled cut right there and then straight across here. Then we're going to move each clip back, drill a hole, and basically move everything back about 1.5 inches. The factory fender well shield will still bolt up to it, so everything will look factory. It will just be about 1.5 inches further back so things don't rub. This is after it's cut. I'm going to go ahead and clean up these edges, but other than that, this is what it's going to look like. It allows a bigger tire without rubbing on those fender wells for sure. Like I said, you're gaining about 1.5 inches to 2 inches more at full lock. So this is definitely what you want to do if your tires are rubbing up on the fender wells. Got the edges cleaned up. Now we're just going to go ahead and place drill holes where I put the Sharpie marker. That's just for those U-nuts. And then we're going to put it on the truck. So here's the driver's side one done. If you look underneath, I got all the bolts through the U-nuts. The hardest one was probably this one right here because the metal bracket actually comes down from up there. And it has to be bent forward a little bit for the 7mm bolt to go through. So keep that in mind. This one has to be bent forward a little bit, then the rest of these will go right in, no problem. Everything is bolted up under here like it should be, and the fog lights will be protected. At the same time, this thing won't rub anymore. As you can see from the inside of the fender well, everything looks stock. If you haven't seen my previous video where I installed the Rough Country 1-inch leveling spacer up here at the top of the strut, I'll link it up at the top right of this video, but I'm gonna kind of go over everything real quickly because I did talk about it in that other video. So if you have any questions, check out that other video and it should get you on track. But for me, since I did that spacer already, these nuts up here will be a 17mm, whereas if you don't have a spacer and they're the stock nuts, they'll be 18. Then we're gonna remove this, the 18mm nut. We're gonna take off the brake line bracket over here, right there. That is a 13mm bolt. Then we're also going to remove the sway bar end link right there, which is a 15mm bolt. You'll also need to remove the 10mm bolt right here holding the ABS wire in place. And the 21mm lower strut bolt will also have to come out. Once we get all that removed, we're going to take out the strut and put the additional spacer under the spring perch. So I have the full 2-inch leveling kit. Got the brake bracket free with that 13mm bolt. Got the ABS wire free from the back of the spindle here with a 10mm bolt. We're going to work on loosening up this bolt here. Like I said, this is an 18mm. Now, just like I mentioned in my previous video, the nut on the strut tower in the back is the hardest one to get to because the ratchet can't move very much. So a thin line ratcheting box wrench is going to be your best bet for this. So we got the strut completely out. Now the fun part. We have to use spring compressors to compress that spring, take the top nut off so we can get to the spring perch underneath. First, before we do anything, we want to mark the strut. So this is how it came out of the truck. So I'm going to put a mark on the spring perch and on the strut and on the top mount, just so I know exactly where everything goes back together. You can use a Sharpie, a paint pen, whatever it is you have. Just make sure you mark this because it's not going to be obvious when you're putting it back together. And you'll have to take it apart a bunch of times and it's not worth it. As you can see here, this is the spring with the compressor still on it. Here's the strut assembly outside of the spring compressors. That silver band right there is the lower portion of the Rough Country leveling kit. So as you can see, it just slides on. You want the outside beveled edge pointing towards the top of the strut. So once that's on, you would then just put your lower spring perch back on the top, drop it down. Like I said, I marked where everything was supposed to go, so that's not a problem later. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the spring back on. Here it is all back together. I'm going to just go ahead and take the spring compressors off now and go ahead and get it back in the truck. Look who decided to show up while I was doing my leveling kit. Just a random natural toad, everyone. Say hi. So I did end up having to take off the tie rod end bolt as well as the actual ABS sensor from the spindle here itself. Both those things coming off made the strut after the spacer go in a lot easier. And once you get it to this point, you're going to realize that separation there is very hard to close. You're going to need something to pry this actual upper control arm down while jacking the wheel spindle up so we can get that nut back on. Because of the added height here, these don't line up as well as they should. So you're going to need some clever methods to get these two together. So now we're just going to do the same thing on the other side. All right guys, so the difference between the 2-inch rough country leveling kit and a stock Colorado. It's not huge, but it is definitely enough to completely level it. I mean, if you look at it from the side especially, it is perfectly level. This must be a 19 though, because it actually has the bison grill on the front as well. All right guys, that's gonna pretty much do it for the installation of the rough country 2-inch leveling kit. Altogether, it ends up being around 2 inches. It's like 1.5 to 1.8 level, and it's pretty much perfect. I mean, it brings the front end up perfectly level with the rear. The installation's not bad, especially for that top spacer. It's really easy. The bottom one's a little more difficult if you do it at home like I did, because spring compressors are just, they're just another thing, another ordeal all in itself. So if you do it yourself, just know the spring compressor part's going to take the longest. It's going to be the most difficult part of the entire process. There's only a couple bolts that have to come out to put that leveling kit in, and honestly, that's the easy part. Getting the strut out, it takes maybe 10 minutes per side. But we also modified the waffle pieces of plastic that fit in the front of the bumper that hold the fender well shield in. Once you cut that back, that will clear up to a 33-inch tire with the appropriate lift. But in my situation, it clears perfectly, even with just a 2-inch level, the stock Midnight Edition rims and tires, and a 1.5-inch spacer pushing everything out. So really not a lot of difficult stuff today, guys, but very effective. Definitely overall a very productive day. I'm actually on my way now down to the alignment place to get another alignment. This is why I bought the lifetime alignment down at Firestone. I had a feeling this was gonna happen. But anyway, guys, that's gonna do it for today's video. So if you liked what you saw, give me a big thumbs up. If you have any questions about the process we did today, shoot them in the comment section down below. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't yet, guys. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one.